Hi, I'm going to show you guys how to do the Salinization Lab today. So you can follow along and this is just how you actually get the lab done. Okay, so bear with me, pause things if you need to. So you will need your bag of salinization equipment, your Salinization Lab notebook, and then the little placemat. This will help you keep track of things. You may also get your hands on a pen and then something like either tape or a Post-it so that you can label things. And then another thing that might be useful to you throughout this lab for your observations is some tweezers. I think that's everything else. We'll figure it out as we go along. So we have gone through the pre-lab about what you need to do to make up your different concentrations of salt. We've decided to use 4%, 2%, 1%, and 0%. 0% will be no salt. 4% is more salt than is in the ocean. So we're pretty sure that that will be our negative control. Actually, I already wrote this wrong. So the positive control is 0% salt, and the negative control is 4% salt, because we want to be sure the negative control is where you know none of the seeds should germinate, even though we have to check that to make sure that everything in our experiment is working well. And then the positive control will be where all of the seeds will germinate, and we expect that to happen with 0% salt. Okay, so let me show you how to do this. First thing you want to do is make sure that you have all the pieces of your equipment. So that is all written out right here, okay? And then everything in bold, you're going to try to return to me, okay? So you're going to use up the paper and the seeds and the salt, but everything else, I hope I can get back in these Ziplocs so I can use them again next year. Okay, so we'll do our best to return everything at the end. So let's get out all of our materials. I'll be right back. Okay, so now that I have all of my equipment out, one of the first things that I want to do is make sure that I have all of my paper cut. So you're going to take the paper that you got here and then cut out 8 pieces of paper so that they will fit into your Petri dish, okay? So what we're going to be doing is putting the seeds and the salt concentrations into the dish, and then putting the seeds on top, and then putting another piece of paper over, and then covering them up, okay? So 8 pieces of paper ready to go with our Petri dishes, okay? So what I'm going to do after I've gotten my 8 pieces of paper all done out is I'm going to make up my concentrations. Okay, so this is where using this little placemat is going to help out because then you can have, you don't have to label all of your stuff. So I've got my positive control at 0%, my variable 1, variable 2, and control, which is my negative control where nobody's going to germinate. So I'm going to start off by making my 4% salt because that's the highest concentration, and that's the one that we're going to make all of our dilutions from. So to do that, I'm going to use my salt, which I have exactly 1% of salt. Let me just see if I can. Okay, now I'm a little more in the camera, maybe. Okay, so great. So this is exactly 1 gram of salt. So we're going to be very careful with this, and we're going to put all of it into 25 milliliters of water. So this is my distilled water. I'm going to carefully pour 25 milliliters of water into the graduated cylinder. And if it wasn't exactly 25 milliliters at the meniscus, right? So that's how you measure 25 milliliters of water, okay? I could use my pipette to like mix back and forth and make sure. Oh, I did forget to say that you should clean everything first. So a lot of the dishes are going to be a little bit dirty. So if you can just wipe them off with a paper towel, it's fine if you wash them with tap water as long as they're clean. Same thing with any of your other materials. So you should clean all your material first. So pause for a minute, clean all your materials, and then start up again. I've already done that here. Okay, so now I am going to pour this into the mixing container. Well, actually, I think I'm going to put the salt in first. All right, so carefully. You only have exactly 1 gram, and you want to get all of that in there. Okay, so put all of your salt carefully into your dish. So you're going to bring this back to me. And then you're going to pour 25 milliliters of water into your 1 gram of salt. And then you just need to really make sure this is well mixed. And now this is our 4% salt solution. We're going to use 5 milliliters of this on the 4% salt solution plate. So you can see it takes a little while for this to dissolve, okay? And I can even squirt up and down a little bit here. I can see that the salt crystals are not completely dissolved yet. If they're not completely dissolved, you will not get accurate concentrations, okay? So take some time to let this completely dissolve. And now, there's no more little grains left there. So now I'm ready to make my, my 2% salt concentration, okay? So to make the 2% salt, I'm going to measure 10 milliliters of water, distilled water, right? Milliliters of distilled water. I'm going to put that into my 2% salt. So now that is 0% salt. And to make it 2%, I'm going to add 10 milliliters of my 4% solution. So 10 milliliters plus of 4% plus 10 milliliters of water will now give me 20 milliliters of 2% salt. So now you make sure that's all mixed up. And just like we just did before, now I'm going to make my 1% salt, which is going to be 10 milliliters of distilled water. Plus 10 milliliters of well mixed. Let me just make sure this is nice and mixed. This should be my 2%. So if you guys are concerned about losing track, that's what this placemat's for, so that I keep everything. You could also use a Post-it to stick it onto there to say what these things are. Please don't write on them with a Sharpie, because I want these back and I want them to be able to get used. So please only mark them with a Post-it or with just use the mat so that you don't get mixed up. All right, so now I don't get mixed up. I have my 2% salt solution. I'm going to measure out 10. And mix that in my 1% salt. Now, for my 0%, I can just pour it straight out of this, but why don't we just do this? So I'm just going to put some in there, and then it's ready to go. So what I have now is my 4 different concentrations, and 0% is a very important concentration. And now I'm ready to put them onto my dishes. So I have my Petri dishes here. Why don't I move this out of the way so you can see it? Okay, so I'm going to have my 4 Petri dishes, and at this point, you should definitely have these labeled. I want you to label the top and the bottom. So I'm going to do that, and I'll come right back. Okay, so I am back, and I have labeled all of my dishes. So I put the 0% on the bottom with a Post-it and 0% on the top with a Post-it, okay? So both the top and the bottom should be labeled with a Post-it. Again, please don't write on the Petri dishes with a Sharpie because I would like these back to be able to get used again, and that would make it so I couldn't reuse them. So now what I'm doing is I'm measuring out 5 seeds per dish. Okay, so you have your little black top with mung beans. So these are mung beans right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I put 5 seeds in each one. And you'll see you have some extras probably. I didn't count out exactly the number. So perhaps I'm excited to see if you guys want to try to do something else later. That's going to be another experiment. So hold on to those things. Okay, so now we are ready to put the correct concentration of salt on each one of these dishes. And we want to have similar amounts on each of these too. So we're going to do 5 milliliters of liquid on each plate. So just so that I can keep things to make sure that they're really accurate, I'm going to start with the lowest concentration of salt, which of course is 0. And I'm going to put 5 milliliters onto the dish. So when I do this, I'm going to try to make sure that all my seeds are in the middle, okay? And then I'm actually going to put the layer of paper on the top first, okay? So if you guys can see this, and then I'll do it a few times, okay? Now I'm going to pour, so this is 0% salt. I'm going to pour 5 milliliters on there, which should be just enough so it's not waterlogged, but it's completely wet. So you can use tweezers or a little stick or something to make sure that everything is all wet. Okay? So now I'm going to do the 1% salt, being very careful because you can't see the difference here, right? So I'm going to put 5 milliliters of 1% salt and see how, so now I'm adding 1% into a graduated cylinder that originally had just plain water in it. And so that's not going to mess up my concentrations. Okay, pour that one on. Guys, feel free to speed up through this if you're bored watching it. Get all the water everywhere. And you don't have to worry too much about them being spread out. It's a little better if they are spread out some. That's my 1%. Now let's do my 2%. So doing all these as accurately as possible, where did my, is going to reduce the variables and increase the accuracy. Whenever you keep things consistent, like using the same amount of liquid, the same amount of seeds, those are all other levels of control. That's a really important thing to have in an experiment because you don't want the reason that your seeds to grow to be because you've added more or less water. The only thing you want to have changed, your variable that you want to change here, is salt concentration and nothing else. And so now we have the 4% salt. Oops, one of my little seeds got out of there. Get in there, seeds. Okay, 4% salt, the most concentrated. 5 milliliters of 4% salt. Sure that all gets wet. And you do want the seeds to be covered. See how that little guy is it's not covered right now? I'm going to pull this back and just make sure that one gets covered because you want them to be completely covered in the salt. Okay. So here is my day 0 seeds ready to go. Now go ahead and put them somewhere. You can actually stack them on top of each other and find a nice sunny place so that they can germinate. And we'll be looking at them every 24 hours.